Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is an unsolved true crime case. It's very interesting. I think I'm going to have a lot of mixed opinions on this because people I've spoken to already who know about this case. There's very mixed opinions. So I've started a new thing called Ask Amélie, and I'm going to link it below, and you put anonymous messages in it. I also have an email as well where you can send your messages in, and basically what you have to do is send in any sort of things you think you need advice on. Like, I don't know if you guys did, but when I was younger I used to get like magazines saying Ask Auntie, and you'd like write to the magazine company and then they'd send you back, like they'd put it in the thing of like advice of what to follow and stuff. And I thought it would be so helpful to just give you guys a bit of advice what I would do in the situation. I've been through a lot of situations with friends, boyfriends, the lot, girls, boys, all of them, family stuff. So I feel like I could give you some good advice, hopefully. So yeah, make sure you put something down below, and that's everything. I'm going to get started. So Caylee Marie Anthony was born on August the 29th 2005, and her mum's name was Caylee Anthony, and it kind of gets a bit confusing because it's Caylee and Casey, so just try and follow along because otherwise you might get a bit confused. Caylee was very close to her grandparents, Cindy and George Anthony. So Casey had Caylee when she was only 19, and Caylee wasn't planned. At this time, Casey still lived with her parents, and she was like your basic teenager, you know, she went out partying a lot and just, you know, being a teenager. So I was can hear snoring in the background. It's my dog. I hope he can't, but if you can, I literally can't help it. He's too old, he just snores all the time. Casey's parents started noticing that she was gaining weight, and they thought she might be pregnant, so they asked her about it and she said no, that she wasn't pregnant. However, a couple of months later she admitted to being pregnant, but she wouldn't say who the dad was, and still it's not public knowledge who the father is. The family probably know, but they haven't told anyone, so nobody really knows who it is, but there's like a few theories of who it could be. However, knowing the dad's identity in this case isn't really necessary. It's just kind of interesting to note that she wouldn't tell anyone. People think that Caylee's dad could have been Casey's ex-boyfriend who died in a car crash. At the time of her pregnancy, she was engaged to someone called Jesse Grand. However, DNA results showed that there was a 0% chance that that was his kid, which they kind of knew anyway because the timing didn't really link up, but I think they were just kind of hoping that it was his. So straight away, you know, like I've said, she lied about being pregnant until she literally couldn't lie anymore. She lied until the point where she was literally about to give birth and then told them. So she kind of, it's shown throughout this case, it's just important to note, it's shown throughout this case that she lies to the point where she's got no other option but to tell the truth. She never tells the truth because she wants to, she only tells the truth when she has to. Like, her friends had even called her compulsive liar. There was another instance when she was in high school. She lied to her parents and grandparents, telling them to come to her graduation, only to get to the high school graduation to find out that she didn't have enough credits to graduate, so she wasn't even graduating. Casey talked about putting Caylee up for adoption when she had her, but mum was really against this, and her mum said, you know, I'll look after her, I'll help you so much, please, you know, keep it. So she did decide to keep Caylee, and the grandparents helped loads with bringing her up. They did everything for her, and Casey and Caylee still lived at the grandparents just so they could look after Caylee a lot. And her fiance, who I mentioned before, raised Caylee like it was his own daughter. Even though they weren't biologically related, he was really good about it. Like, he still treated like it was his daughter. So this all starts in mid-June 2008. Casey had an argument with her parents because they basically called her out, saying that she wasn't responsible enough to have a kid, and just basically questioning her ability to raise a child. And this really annoyed Casey. Like, Casey got so mad when they did this. And it ended up turning into a big fight where Casey actually left the family house, taking Caylee with her. She didn't tell her family where she'd gone, but she moved in with her ex-boyfriend, Ricardo Morales, and also her friend Amy Rusinger. Amy Rusinger. I think that's how you say it. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. So Casey's parents were really worried about Caylee because, you know, they'd never been away from Caylee before. They literally raised Caylee like it was their kid. Like, they looked after Caylee a lot. And like I said before, they really questioned Casey's ability to raise a child. The grandparents would call Casey regularly and, you know, ask to speak to Caylee, and she'd always have an excuse. She'd always say that either she was like on a play date at a friend's house, or she was playing with Zanny the nanny. So the grandparents had never actually met this nanny because Casey had employed this nanny herself. So the nanny was called Zindia Gonzalez, and they just used to call her Zanny, so it turned into Zanny the nanny. So July 13th 2008, George and Cindy got a letter in the post saying that Casey's car was in a tow yard. I don't know what we call that in England. Do we still call that a tow yard, or is it something else? When George went to pick up this car, he found that Casey's purse was still in the car and Caylee's booster seat and toys were still in the car, which was quite strange because Casey literally just abandoned her car in a random place with all like important things in. George actually said that there was a terrible smell in the boot of the car, and they said that it smelled like there'd been a decomposing body in the car. So this instantly worried him because he hadn't seen Caylee in over a month at this point. Like, they went from seeing Caylee every single day to not seeing her for a full month. You know what I mean? Like, they were really worried. They didn't know what had happened to her. So Cindy and George found Casey's friend, Amy, that she was living with, and said take her to Casey, we need to speak to her. And when they found Casey, there was no sign of Caylee anywhere. So they asked her, like, you know, where's Caylee? Because Kaylee's only little, she shouldn't be anywhere by herself. Casey just replied saying, oh, you know, she's with Zanny the nanny. Cindy was very worried at this point, so she said, right, well, take her to her. I want to say I want to check she's okay because I haven't seen her in so long. So Casey had them in the car and she was literally just driving them blindly around the neighbourhood, and it was obvious she was just kind of telling them to go here and here but didn't know where she was going. When Casey couldn't lie anymore, she had nothing else to do, like she had to tell the truth. She finally told them that Caylee had been missing for 31 days and that Zanny the nanny had took her. I can't imagine the shock that Cindy and George were feeling. This little girl was their world, do you know what I mean? Like, and then they just found out she'd been missing for 31 days and their own daughter hasn't told anyone or reported it or anything. I just don't even know what you would think in that time. Like, I really don't. Now this is like really crucial because every hour, every second counts in a missing person case, especially a child missing person case. And the likelihood of finding a child after 31 days is like basically minuscule. Like, it's really unlikely you're gonna find a child after 31 days because it could be anywhere. Cindy absolutely freaked out and she called 911. She actually called them 3 times, but the 3rd time is kind of the most noticeable one. Like, when it was played in court, it's kind of got the most attention. And I'm not going to play it because I think it's quite upsetting, but I will link it below if you want to listen to it. One thing I thought was really interesting that Cindy actually said on this 911 call was, there's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car. So at this point, the police have literally got no idea what to do because she's been missing for 31 days. They've got no leads. They don't know anything because they really don't know what to do because, like I said, this girl's been missing for 31 days. The likelihood of finding a child after 31 days or any missing person is literally minuscule. Everyone was saying to Casey, why didn't you report your daughter missing? And I'll play a little clip of what she said on an interview, which I thought was really interesting.
Didn't you call prior to today?
I think part of me was naive enough to think that I could handle this myself, which obviously I couldn't. I was scared that something would happen to her if I did notify the authorities or got the media involved or my parents, which I know would have done the same thing.
July 16th, 2008, Casey was arrested for child neglect because she failed to report her daughter missing for 31 days. In these 31 days that Caylee was missing, Casey's behaviour is so bizarre. So Casey put across this story to the police saying, you know, I was searching for her, I was doing everything I could, I was so scared, I was so nervous, and really made it seem like, you know, how a normal mother would react in the situation, I guess. But there's actually photos and everything of her, and she was out partying, she was out drinking, she was doing hot body competitions, she even got a tattoo saying beautiful life. And the media went absolutely crazy when they found this out. Like, straight away, as soon as they seen the way that she behaved in the time that her daughter was missing, straight away it was all eyes on her, and, you know, everyone straight away blamed her. Like, people got so suspicious of her straight away because of her behaviour when Caylee was missing. It's not normal behaviour, but some people do say, I know everyone grieves in different ways, she was probably really stressed or nervous, but at the same time it's like, I don't know, doing hot body competition when your baby girl's missing, like, I just, no. Casey told the police that she worked in Universal Studios in Orlando. Police asked to see her office, so Casey said, yeah, I'll show you my office. She walked around Universal Studios with the police, waving at different members of staff, like, you know, as if like she knew them, as if she was friends with them. And then she got to an end of a corridor when she literally had nowhere else to go and turned around and said, oh, I don't work here, they fired us years ago. She lied to the police literally until she got to the end of the corridor, until there was no more doors, no more officers left for her to claim were hers. And she'd been lying to her parents, like literally years she'd been lying to her parents about it. Police are looking for Zanny at this point, Zanny the nanny, because Casey is saying that's who took her daughter, but Casey's got no address, phone number, anything. Nothing about her. She doesn't know anything about her. Casey kind of just gave them loads of like weird little clues and basically sent them on a wild goose chase. So the day after her arrest, on July 17th, 2008, police got sniffer dogs and took them to the car, and they picked up the scent of a decomposing body in the boot of the car. August 27th, 2008, police did an air sample test of Casey's car, and again this indicated that there'd been a decomposing body in the car. However, Casey was sticking with the story. Casey was saying Zanny had taken her, it wasn't anything to do with her. There was thousands of people searching on boat, on helicopters, on foot. The grandparents were doing everything they could. They were making shirts with her name on and just really getting her case out there, letting everyone know to look out for this young girl, Caylee. It was shown that Cindy and George were really trying to stick up for the daughter. I think deep down they knew something was up, but I think, you know, this is their daughter at the end of the day and you can't judge them on how they act in the situation. So on the 24th of September 2008, a woman with the same name that she was claiming to be the name of the nanny filed a lawsuit against her. This woman lived in Kissimmee, Florida. She wasn't a nanny and she had nothing to do with this case. And police actually think that Casey just went in like a phone book and picked out a name and said, yep, that was the nanny. Sadly, on December the 11th, 2008, a man named Rory Cronk, who was a meter reader, got assigned a route like near where the Anthonys lived. So he read the meters in one neighbourhood, and as he was going to go to the other neighbourhood, he went into the woods near the house just to go to the toilet, and there he found a black bin bag, and he said it just seemed a bit strange, so he checked it out to see what it was, and he used his meter reader to hit it, and he heard like a hollow noise. So he had a look inside the bag and found a skull, like a human skull. He said he first assumed it was a Halloween mask until he saw there was duct tape still like loosely attached around the mouth area. He called the police, and straight away they suspected that the skeletal remains would be Caylee because it was so close where she lived. And the man who discovered her remains had said it looked like a child's remains. And this man got a lot of hate and a lot of abuse from the media for, you know, hitting it with these meter stick. But he actually reported this bag in the wood to the police. The first time he reported it, they didn't even look properly. They just shrugged him off. I think by the fourth time, I think he was just kind of like, what is in this bag? And he went and just checked for himself because the police didn't listen to him 4 times. Which you don't really hear a lot, and the media doesn't really put that out there. On December the 19th, it was announced that the remains were Caylee Anthony. However, they couldn't determine a cause of death because at this point, she was a skeleton and there was no obvious sign of trauma to her bones or anything. Like, there was nothing obvious that they could see. At this point, she'd likely been outside for about 6 months in Florida weather. Around 6 months after Caylee's remains were found, George Anthony actually tried to commit suicide because he just said he wanted to be with Caylee, and he was so sad and so depressed. It's just horrible. It's so sad what happened. So the trial finally started in May 2011. This case had been so publicised that there was literally people outside of the court having physical fights, physical altercations just to get these tickets to get in, because in Florida you can like buy a ticket to get into the courtroom. Crowds of people would turn up outside of Cindy and George's houses, calling them baby murderers and horrible things like that, because, you know, they were sticking with the daughter and they were trying to stick up for her basically, and people didn't like that. People really didn't like that. So obviously Casey was in jail for a few years while she was awaiting a trial, and Casey actually pleaded not guilty, but she pleaded guilty to 13 fraudulent check charges, which she did while she was out on bail. So Casey's attorney is quite a well-known attorney called Jose Baez, and he was in the media a lot and he would talk about Casey a lot in the whole case. In the trial, it was found that in the Anthony house, the computer that they used, there was searches for neck breaking, household weapons, and how to make chloroform. Now, if you don't know what chloroform is, it's a substance that can knock people out instantly. Like, it can knock you out so quickly. If you put it on like a rag and put it over someone's nose and mouth, they'll pass out straight away. Cindy actually took the stand in court and said that she searched them things apart from household weapons, and she basically just kind of played dumb a bit. She kind of just said like, oh, I was trying to search this and these things started popping up and you know, just pretending that she had no idea why they were there. However, it was really unlikely that Cindy searched this because she would have been at work at this time. A lot of people think that maybe Casey was sick of being a mum and she used the chloroform to drug Caylee and knock her out, which, you know, has been seen in other cases before, like, you know, the Madeleine McCann case, when they used, I can't remember what it was, I think it was some sort of Calpol thing, but they used that to make Madeleine sleep. And it's not uncommon for people to do that. The prosecution put forward the argument that Casey didn't want to be a mum anymore and she just wanted to go out partying, so she knocked her daughter out with chloroform and then covered her nose and mouth with duct tape, which meant that she suffocated and died. It's widely believed that Casey put Caylee's body in the boot of her car for a while, possibly days, and that's why there was that bad smell and that's why the cadaver dogs smelt it in the back of the car. So the defence came out at the start of the trial with a completely different story. No one had even suspected this. It was completely out of the blue, random, that was brought out. The story was that the Anthony family basically weren't who they pretended to be. There was a lot more violence and arguments and fighting and unhappiness in the house, and that led on. They basically said that the house was very dysfunctional. They even accused Casey's dad of sexually molesting her as a child, and they said this is why Casey lied a lot, because she learned from a young age that she couldn't tell the truth. There's even people who think that George is Caylee's dad. Casey's version of events is that Casey drowned in the family pool because they had a family pool, and obviously when you've got children you've always got to put the cover on the pool and take away the ladder so they can't climb up. And people think that maybe it was accidentally left there and they forgot to put it away on June the 16th, 2008. And basically George covered up this drowning and disposed of Caylee's body. They believe the reason that he attempted suicide a couple of weeks later from the body being found was because they didn't want them to be able to take DNA, because that DNA evidence would show that he was Caylee's dad. So I never want to say that somebody's lying about something like this because it's really serious. It's quite a touchy subject for a lot of people. However, it doesn't really make much sense. I kind of felt this is very unlikely. Our dad was molesting her and that our dad was the father, for multiple reasons. One is that it doesn't really make sense. If this had have happened, why would they not have just called an ambulance? You know, accidents do happen. It's horrible, but things like this do happen. Children do. And yes, maybe they might have been charged with child neglect, but being charged with child neglect and being charged with murder is completely different. They were risking capital punishment here. Also, the grandparents were the ones who contacted 911. They were the one that were checking up and saying, you know, where's Caylee, where's Caylee? And on top of that, Casey was known to be a compulsive liar. So I don't really think you can say 100% this is true. I don't think you can say 100% it's false, because it could be true. However, if this is false, it's absolutely heartbreaking that Casey was willing to just throw her dad in front of the bus to get out of trouble. Like, that is so heartbreaking that she was prepared to ruin and taunt her dad's whole reputation and whole life, especially with the fact of how vulnerable her dad was at this time. I mean, not long before this he had been trying to commit suicide, so he was obviously in a very dark place. When Casey was in jail, she had phone calls with her and her dad saying how great of a dad he was and how great of a granddad he was and how she was so lucky to have him, which again doesn't really add up with the story. George got on the stand and denied all the allegations and said that he didn't hurt Caylee and that he didn't molest Casey ever. George and Cindy stayed supporting Caylee even throughout these claims she was making. They stayed supporting her, and I think it was probably because obviously they were the parents, but they'd already lost one daughter. You know, Caylee was like their daughter. They'd already lost her and they didn't want to lose a second one. So, like I said before, the cadaver dogs smelt the decomposing body in the back of the boot, and it was also found there was high levels of chloroform in the back of the boot as well. And chloroform led to the police to believe, you know, it was decomposition. However, the defence had an answer for this. They said it was because Casey had rubbish bags, like she had rubbish in the back of her car. And obviously, like I said before, Florida heat. I mean, it wouldn't have smelled great, the back of her car, if she did have rubbish in it for weeks, but a dead body is a very different smell to rubbish. The problem with this trial is there was no evidence, there was no cause of death, and they kind of had nothing to go off because it had been so long. There was nothing on her body that they could use. She was literally a skeleton at this point. There was nothing that they could use. There was just so much speculation around this case. The jury was really hard to find because this case was so well known, and they actually had to keep them away from the families. They wouldn't let them watch news, have phones, nothing, like keep them isolated from the rest of the world so they couldn't have a biased opinion. On July 5th 2011, the jury deliberated for just under 11 hours and they came back with their verdict.
In the Circuit Court for the 9th Judicial Circuit in and for Orange County, Florida, State of Florida versus Caylee Marie Anthony. As to case number 2008 CF 15606-0. As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. As to the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. So say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment.
When her verdict was read out, I will show you some clips, but people went absolutely mental.
As to count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. The charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, verdict as to count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
Not guilty! No!
Are you kidding me? What? Not guilty? Not guilty of child abuse. No way. Oh my God!
She was sentenced to 4 years in jail. However, she'd already been in custody for quite a while, for a good few years, awaiting trial. So on July 17th 2011, Caylee Anthony was released from jail. She had to be in hiding for quite a few years because people just hated her. She was named America's most hated woman. Everybody hated her, everyone wanted to kill her, and she was at very high risk. Later that year in September, the judge ruled that Caylee owed $98,000 for leading police on and leading them on this wild goose chase, looking for this nanny and giving them false information. He also ruled that she owed $120,000 to the police, which meant that she owed $217,000, which obviously is a lot of money. Caylee can't get a job, she can't live a normal life, she can't go anywhere, she can't do anything. Everybody knows her name, everybody knows her face, and everybody knows her story. She has no money and she's basically living a bit of a boring life. She doesn't have any friends or anything. At one point she was given a job by one of the attorneys that was working on her case to be like a live-in nanny and look after their child. She's recently had interviews where she says she doesn't care what people think and she sleeps well at night. She still upholds that she was not responsible for Caylee's death and nobody was ever charged. Now, that's the end of all the facts, but I just want to say this case makes me so mad. It makes me so angry because there is a part of us that thinks, what if Caylee Anthony is truly not guilty and the whole media's turned against her, the whole country's turned against her, her whole life's ruined, her child's gone, and what if genuinely Caylee is suffering this much when it wasn't her? However, I do think even if it wasn't Caylee, she definitely knows something. It makes me so mad that this baby girl was killed and thrown away like a piece of rubbish in a ditch and nobody's been held accountable, nobody, free outside. A big downfall in this case was the prosecuting attorneys were really going hard for the death penalty. And I think maybe if they weren't going so hard for the death penalty, the jury would have been more likely to have indicted her. But anyway guys, you have to let us know what you think. I'll have all my socials linked below like usual. I hope you are all doing well. This quarantine stuff is horrible, I know, but we're all going to do fine. We're all going to pull through. Any worries, anything you want to speak about, put it in the Ask Amélie thing that I'll have down there. And I will see you guys next week. Goodbye. Love you, angels.